All right, hello. Welcome to another video where we are learning more about FileMaker Pro. My name is Matt Petrowski, and in this video, what we're going to be learning about is global fields. So stick around and we'll be on my desktop in no time. All right, so glad you could join me for this video. And in this video, we're going to be taking a look at global fields, and we fully want to understand how they work in the context of FileMaker. First off, because the word global is very confusing when you're first getting started with FileMaker. Now, I'm going to rewind a little bit. There was a video that I did 2 videos prior to this, and a comment by, I believe, Daniel was left, and I'm going to open that file really quickly. So let me switch to that here in FileMaker. It was the contacts file, and what we were taking a look at, as I zoom in here and go into layout mode, is I was taking, it's the video titled about the calculation engine, and I wanted to make a clarification because you made a really good point. I was showing you as a new FileMaker user something that's a little bit of a complex technique. It's basically, although I consider the information I'm giving you basic information, things that you need to know, even if you can't implement them right away. I was explaining that this value right here, this full name merge global field, is something that you can actually set and update using the hide calculation. Now, you're going to have to go back to that video. It's about the calculation engine itself. But the point that he made in this particular example was such that, Matt, if you just wanted to show the first name and the last name on the layout, why didn't you just use the direct merge fields themselves? And the answer is yes, in that particular case, that's what I should have done. I guess that's what I get for showing simple examples or trying to show simple examples using a method that can be solved otherwise. So in this regard, with that particular situation, if you had a first name and a last name field and you just wanted to show the full name without creating a field called full name that's a calculation field, the easiest thing is just to use these 2 merge fields. Otherwise, if you do need to access the calculation engine, then do it with a merge variable or a merge global variable. And that was the point of that video. So, all right, that's out of the way. I've clarified that now. Let's close that file down. Let's learn what we are interested in learning. Now, in this video, what we're going to do is I'm not going to create a file that you are necessarily going to follow along with because I have a very specific environment set up here. In particular, as I bring Safari forward, we are looking at a copy or the interface of the administration panel of FileMaker Server. We can see right here that I'm running FileMaker Server. Now, I am running this copy of FileMaker Server on my local machine. This is actually running on my Mac. And I do this so that I can actually learn and understand everything about how FileMaker Server works. As a new FileMaker user or FileMaker learner, you probably are just going to provide a FileMaker file to someone and they're going to upload it to FileMaker Server, and all of the details of running FileMaker Server really don't concern you. But what does concern you is as you're building your database system, you need to know what the impacts are of global fields. Now, I've already mentioned in actually the video just prior to this one, video 3 in this lesson about field and calculations, that there are primarily 3 places that you can store data. The first one is you've got your fields. Those are easy: text, number, date, date time, so forth. The second place that you can store data is within a temporary, it's a very temporary variable called a local variable. And then third place is a global variable. Now, you could consider that there's a 4th place, but essentially I combine the 3 and 4 options together, and that is global fields. Both of them act the same way in FileMaker. It's just that one gets added to your database where the other one is basically just created ad hoc whenever you need to. So as we can see on screen here, I have this file that I've already created called global fields, and you're going to be able to follow along in this particular video so that we understand. Now, the interesting area that we're looking at is this clients. Notice that there's nobody is connected to this file, or that's what FileMaker Server is going to be telling me. So as I zoom out here, I'm going to switch over to FileMaker, and we are going to open up that global fields. The launch center is going to come up. I'm going to double click, and we have this file right here. Now we're going to be watching this in the background right here, the number of clients that are connected, because this is just one of the ways that I can prove to you how and why global fields work the way that they do. Now, as a new FileMaker learner, a global field is simply just a single setting on any of your fields. Any normal field that you create, text, number, date, whatever, any of them can be turned into a global field. And contrary to what the name sounds like, which you say, I'm going to create a global text field, and that's going to be global to all users who use this file. Wrong. It actually doesn't work that way. The way that global fields work is global fields are actually local to the copy of FileMaker that's actually running. So in order to prove this point, we need two different types of fields. I'm going to go into the defined database, and we're going to see the two fields that I have in this particular file. Now, as I mentioned in some of my previous videos, I like to name all of my fields that are going to be global. I like to name them in all capital letters because it gives me a very quick way to identify that these are globals as opposed to just standard local fields. So we have two fields in this. In fact, let's take a look at the tables. I only have two tables, so if you want to create the same type of file and follow along, you certainly can. I have a dashboard file, or a dashboard table, excuse me, and a people table. Now, when we look at people's super simple too. People just has an ID field. That's something that's absolutely unique to each and every record. And then it has a name field. The name field is text. The ID field is an auto enter serial. Now, I'm going to double click the field here and bring this up. We can see here is the serial number. And we're going to talk in a future video. Please, I am only using this for the purpose of demonstration. What you're going to find in this series that I am going to make the suggestion that you never choose this option in all of FileMaker, which will be a shocker to some of you out there if you're an intermediate or advanced developer, or if you already have a FileMaker database. If you already have a FileMaker database and your primary key is already based on a serial number, don't worry. Nothing's bad in the situation with what I'm going to suggest. But in today's modern computing world with databases and distributed systems, you will almost always want to choose a calculated value down here for your primary key, and you will probably be using a UUID or some type of equivalent. And we'll talk about that in a future video. But on this particular video, for the purpose of demonstration, we're just fine with numbers because numbers, they make sense, they're easier to understand. All right, so we have just those two tables with two fields. Now we need some relationships, and we've got that right here. So in my dashboard table, that's the layout is tied to this dashboard table. And I have the two fields. I have one field that's a global field, and I have one field that's a regular field. And I have two relationships, obviously, going out of that. One of them is from this global keys field over to the ID field. And here we've got it from the record keys field over to the ID in the people too. So these are just a copy of the exact same table. Remember, table occurrences in FileMaker, they're like ghosts, they're aliases, they're shortcuts. They are not actual copies of the tables. They are pointers to the tables. They just represent the table. So I can have as many pointers to the underlying people table as I want, and I have two of them here. And they're both related based on different things. Now we can see that because of these little indicators right here. Whenever you relate based on a global field, you'll have this little, I think of it as the stop sign. It's just the hand up. Then you have this little sign right here that it's basically called crow's feet. I believe a lot of developers call it the crow's feet, but it represents many. So it means in this scenario, I can have many different keys in this one field relating to all of the different matching people. So let's look at this. It's much easier to follow along visually. I'm going to go in the define manage layouts. I did that with Command-Shift-L. We'll bring up the people layout. All right, so here's our people. It's super simple. I just have, it looks like 76 records in here, and I've got them, they're all sequentially numbered. You never, with a primary key, ever want to have the possibility that you have 2 5s or 2 6s or 2 duplicate UUIDs. We'll look at preventing that with validation. But here I have a list of DevCon speakers. So here is the key distinction with global fields. And I need to show you how to set up a global field. I can't overlook that. I need to go back into Define Database, into the fields for the dashboard. And let's take a look at how do you actually set a field to being a global. I probably glossed over this, and you need to know. You can double click the field. It's the same thing as clicking our options. Once that comes up, there is an area in the settings of the field called storage. And it's basically this little checkbox right here, global storage. So this text field, this number field, date time, whatever it is, as soon as you check this box, what it does is it says this is now a global field. And you're, of course, given the indication about that right here in the list of all of your fields. It says this field is global. So now let's look at the impact. But in order to do that, I'm going to show you a nice little trick. If you are even intermediate, or I can discard there, if you're an intermediate or even an advanced developer, this is an awesome little trick. As a computer user, you should know that when you open an application, that application is just loaded into memory. And because it's loaded into memory, you can actually load multiple copies of that same application into memory. So when I hold on this bar right here and I can see that FileMaker is right here, actually I can open another copy of FileMaker. You can do this both on Windows and on Macintosh. On Windows, you have to do a right-click type of shift-click, and I'll try to show it on my virtual machine here. But on the Macintosh, you need to open the terminal. So this can be a little scary for some people. I'm going to create a terminal window. Terminal is that application right there. Let's see if my highlight cursor is not going to work on that, but that's all right. Terminal can be scary, but really once you're given a command, it's sort of like Todd Geist. He probably got this from somewhere. He's a well-known FileMaker developer. He mentions it's just like texting back and forth with your operating system, and it's a really good analogy. I'm going to text to my operating system that I want to open, and I'm going to say -in, which stands for new, and then I'm going to say -a for what's the application that you want to open another copy of. And I'm just going to type in FileMaker Pro Advanced because that's what I'm actually using. If you're using FileMaker Pro, then it would just be FileMaker Pro. So everything went black there, probably because of my full screen on Windows, my VMware hid. All right, we'll restore that machine while that happens. Sorry about that. In the background, that is my fault for Windows hiding in the background there. So sorry about that. Let's see if we can get that open. We'll hide it anyway. Sorry about that. All right. So where am I at? Did I open it? We can always see. There we go. 2 copies of FileMaker. So you can see that I have 2 copies of FileMaker now open at the same time. So what this represents is copy A is user A, and copy B is going to be user B. So let's switch. This is copy A right here. And over here on copy B, we have the launch center. Let me open up the global fields there. All right, and we'll hide some of this stuff on the background. So here is our takeaway so far. Notice in between here what actually happened in FileMaker Server. I have 2 clients connected. So this is basically like 2 different people on 2 different computers. That's exactly what we want to see. And this allows us to actually, and I'm going to hide Safari so we can keep things simple. We have got the two copies. Here is user A, here is user B, and we can see what happens with the global field. This is the key takeaway for this whole video if you're new to working with FileMaker. And it is this. When I store keys into a particular field, and I'm going to put the keys of, we have to recognize that I'm on record number 1 out of 2 records, and I'm going to say, on this record number 1, I want to use the keys of 1, I'll put a return for 4, a return for 5, 6, and then 16. So this is basically going to go look at all of those primary keys. This is a portal right next to this field, and we're going to see that as soon as I click out of this field, the record gets committed, and shortly after that, what happens is FileMaker sent, or this particular copy A, sent to FileMaker Server, I've got new data, please commit it. Then FileMaker Server said, okay, I need to tell all other copies of FileMaker. And you saw that shortly, this record over here, this user B, which is a completely separate copy of FileMaker, just as if somebody else was on another computer, it actually updated. And that happens every time that you're using FileMaker. If I add a new record here, 17, that person will get added, and then FileMaker will get updated on the other side. If a user B is working on a database and they remove a particular value, then it will be updated for user A. But with a global field is local only to the copy of FileMaker that's actually running it. So let's take the global keys here for user A that's on a completely different machine, and let's put in 7, 9, 23, and 45. Here's what my portal shows for user A. But what does user B see when they have any values in that global field? They do not see anything because their global field for those keys is completely different. This is where global fields really are the same thing as a global variable. They only persist and exist as long as this copy of FileMaker is actually running. So knowing this, you can now start to take advantage of global fields in order to do all kinds of things. In particular, they're really useful for relationships, but otherwise, if the data is temporary that you only need to store while the actual copy of FileMaker is running, I prefer to use global variables. And I consider them the same thing. The distinction is where a global variable is something that you create as part of scripts or using a let function. Global fields are something that you add into your database. And that, in my opinion, isn't always the best, to be able to add a field, because it adds to the clutter and it adds to the maintenance and it adds to the confusion for anybody else who comes in after the fact. So if you can avoid it, good. But if not, create the global field. It's really no big deal. And there's actually a whole technique where you can create a whole table just dedicated to globals. There's an advanced technique that basically global fields can be seen by all other tables. It's always good to relate them, but look at that. Look at how cool that is here, that if I know that Mary is on user A and I'm using a global field she's using a global field over here, and she wants to selectively choose to see these people of Mike, Henrique, Albert, and Ryan. But over here, Bob is using a completely different copy of FileMaker, and he wants to see these people right here, Kevin, Jeremy, and Mark. I wasn't going to try to pronounce the first one. Sorry if I get that wrong, or I would get that wrong. So that's how global fields work, and it works for all of your different types. A global text field, a global number field, a global date time. The whole notion is that it's local. So if you need a good visual of this, I've got a good little file that I can use right here in order to explain this so that you understand what's going on, or so you understand, what are the ways that I can store data. So let's see if my cursor comes on, and there we go. All right, so option number 1, option number 2, and option number 3. Option number 1 is you just can use a standard field. That is your permanent storage. You can store data there. Option number 2 that I've been referring to is actually just a local variable, and that is basically just a single $sign. Option number 3 is, again, it's a field, And I'm going to put a G in this one to store or to represent global, but we also have these double dollar signs, which are our global variables. So in total, that is all of the places of where you can store data in FileMaker. So let's talk about what happens. When you close this file down, this data sticks around. When you close this file down, and actually this variable has nothing to do with the file itself, it really only has to do with however long a script is running. So however long a script is actually running, once that script completes, that variable goes away, or that temporary value. It also happens to apply to calculations. If you use a local variable within a calculation, after that calculation is finished evaluating, that variable goes away. When this file shuts down, this file, when it shuts down, anything that's in either of these goes away, except for one particular instance. And this is something that you need to know about. Variables go away because they're something that you create when the file is opened, and then they just go away whenever you tell them to go away or when the file is shut down. Global variables, however, have this one unique aspect, and it is this. If you are creating the file on your local computer, prior to uploading it to FileMaker, whatever values exist within this global field will be the default starting values when that file is opened. So let's switch back to our example here. We'll hide that. We'll hide this guy, and we'll go back to our example. So here we have our two files, and our two files, I can tell that they're shared. You can always see that a file is shared because up in the top, FileMaker changes the title name, and it puts these parentheses around this title bar. That's how you know that a FileMaker file is shared. Now, you can't always trust this in the title bar because you have control as the developer to actually change the title of the window at any time. You can make this go away. But if nothing has actually changed that, whenever you see the parentheses, you know the file is hosted. If you don't see the parentheses, when the file is opened, if I was to put these values into this field and then share this file up to FileMaker Server, then that means every time that this file is opened, these are the values that will exist. They will be the defaults for this global field. So the takeaway on this particular item is if you want this file to open fresh, just prior to uploading the file, you need to delete and get rid of any values that are in all global fields before you upload the file. Otherwise, if you do have defaults that you want the file to actually start with, then populate those values into the global fields, then upload the file to FileMaker Server, and that's when you'll have those defaults that will apply to all users. But remember, even if I defaulted with 3, 4, and 5 here because I wanted, for some reason, everybody to see these 3 people as the managers, as the user is using the file, or as each FileMaker user uses a copy of FileMaker, these completely can be removed. They can be changed. They can be set to whatever you want in order for them to be. I can look at any other values. And this here is the key. I showed this in a previous video. If it hasn't sort of clued in for some of you, as a new FileMaker user, one of the things you're probably not going to be exposed to right off the bat is the fact that we can do this multi-key operation. We can actually have a return delimited list in a text field, and in most situations, in a relationship, you will tend to have a like-for-like connection. In other words, because this field is a number field, most of the time I would have a number field on the other side of a relationship. In this particular situation, global keys is a text field and ID is a number field. This is a local text field and this is a number field. And so hopefully I've been able to do a good job of explaining the fact that globals, despite their name, are not global in nature at all. They're completely local to each copy of FileMaker that's running. So if I have 50 different computers, I could have 50 different sets of values in the global fields, but knowing that it is local to the actual machine gives you all of the advantages that you want to have. If you want a user to come in and you want that user to be able to change a set of values, 3, 4, 5, 10, and you want all users to see the exact same thing, you can use a local field. And that's what everybody will see on all copies of FileMaker. FileMaker will update it. If you want each user to be able to control what they see independent of all other users, then you use a global field for your keys. And it works a charm. It's how you can accomplish a ton of things in FileMaker, because most of the time, users are tending to do different types of work. Some information is shared, but other times it's focused just on the user. All right, so I hope that's given us a good example. One thing, if you want to run the same type of setup that I'm running here on my local machine, if you want to be able to run FileMaker Server, I'm going to show you this URL on the magazine website. This is probably a video that you would need to actually get access to. That would require a subscription, but it is this right here, video/videos local development using FileMaker Server. I don't know why there's trailing space on the end, but that should load it. I'll put this also in the comments in the bottom of this particular YouTube video, and you'll be able to follow along. If you have questions, this is a good time with regards to asking questions, anything about globals that you have a question about, or anything that I actually may have gotten wrong about this, which I don't think I have, but we can check. Looks like I don't have I don't have any questions on globals. I think we've covered globals pretty well. I can switch over there temporarily in case anybody wants to. It's just my larger view. As you can see, no questions came in. But I think we've done a good job of covering globals here in this particular video. So I'll probably wrap this up. If there's anything that you want to learn about FileMaker, or if this video has helped you out, or any of the other videos in this series that I'm doing on YouTube, please feel free to give me the thumbs up. It really helps me with YouTube's rankings. If you're interested, the subscribe is going to be coming up shortly, but I really appreciate you tuning in, watching this video, and I hope it's helped you learn more about what you can do with FileMaker, the impacts of how you structure things in terms of how it impacts your particular solution. So with that, we're going to be heading out, and there it is. You can subscribe here, and you will find the next video right here. All right, see you later.